Thank you for tuning in to Matters of the Heart Radio Live with your host, biblical counselor and author, Ms. Wendy. We want to hear from you today. Call into the show at 469-844-5152. You can also chat with us by clicking on the chat icon in your player to send us a message. Now, here's your host, Ms. Wendy.
Hello and welcome to Matters of the Heart Radio Show Live. Thank you for joining me on this wonderful day. It is such a blessing to be able to spend some time with you, and this next hour is going to be wonderful. I have a beautiful lady here with me who's going to talk about beauty in a number of ways, inside and out, and just how mighty God is to heal and to restore. I'm not sure where you're listening from, but I do want to welcome all of the new listeners on Victory Television Network and Victory Radio. I send a warm greeting to you here from Dallas, Texas. Well, we're going to jump into the topic of the show. Miss Sue McGray has written a book called Becoming Visible, and the title of her book really captured me. I met Sue a few months ago at a conference, and there was just something unique and very special about her. A nice smile, yes. Some spunk, well, sure. But there was just something different, and it was great to get to chat with her in the elevator first and then to get to know her. And I know you are going to be glad that we ran into each other at this conference as she shares her story. Well, Sue, welcome to the show.
Good morning, Miss Wendy.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so glad to have you, Sue. Now, Sue, tell us a little bit about you and tell us what inspired you to write this book, Becoming Visible.
Well, Miss Wendy, thank you. I think everybody has a story. I just think that life takes us so many times to unexpected places we never thought we'd find ourselves. Mm-hmm. And so when it came time to think about my grandchildren, I have 5 granddaughters, no grandsons, and I wanted them to know the real me, if you will. Mm-hmm. We play dress up and we do fun girly things and do those kind of things, but I didn't feel like they really knew who I was. So I started to write it, and then as other people started to hear my story, they would just say, that's my story too. And in hoping and believing that if I can just make somebody else's life a little clearer, they can but start to believe in themselves, then it's worth it. So that's kind of how it all was birthed, is just wanting my grandchildren to know more about me and wanting to give other people encouragement.
Mm-hmm. So, Sue, now we want to know more about you. Kind of tell us a little bit about your childhood and then your life. I know you worked at a grocery store. I won't say which one, but my daughters worked there. And I'd love for people to get a glimpse as to who you are and where you're coming from.
Well, there are really 3 things that shaped me for adulthood. And these 3 things were on the negative side. I feel like they really kind of molded me, maybe set me up even for codependency or for an abuser. First of all, when I was a small child, I grew up in the country, and my folks, I was the oldest daughter, and they spanked the boys, but they didn't want to spank me. So for punishment, they locked me up in a smokehouse. Mm-hmm. Now, a smokehouse is where my parents cured the meat in the wintertime, and it was a dark, cool, cold place. And they locked me up there. They didn't mean ill intent, but it did an emotional trip on me. Mm-hmm. I learned very quickly that if I showed any emotions, any feelings, then I would be punished, and I would be locked up in that dark smokehouse. And that kind of set the stage for controlling me, that I didn't have any, I guess, even any self-worth. I just couldn't have any expression. And then when I was a little older, junior in high school, we were riding the school bus, and the school bus driver ran over and killed my sister. Oh. And she was mine. I just didn't give birth to her. But I made her clothes and cut her hair, and she was my child. And that really messed me up. And so the day she got killed, we were getting on the bus, and I was already on the bus, and the school bus driver closed the door on her foot and flipped her over and ran over her body. Mm-hmm. I ran back up, found her, had to call for my parents and for help. And that afternoon, I went to the backyard, and I said to myself, I'll take care of this. I'll just bury my feelings forever. I'm going to put my feelings in this, and I literally took a stick, and I dug a hole in the ground, and I symbolically buried my feelings in that hole. Mm. So I was bound and determined that I would never let any hurt come to me like that again, ever, ever, ever.
And how old were you, Sue?
I was a junior in high school, so I was about 16,
okay.
15, 16, somewhere along there. We had just moved to this house. We were having a really hard time financially. My dad was a pastor. There was never any money. And so we had to rent a house with some other families, and so there were several children catching the bus. I was the third thing I feel like that really there were red flags with a relationship. I was seeing a young man. He wanted to get married. I said, no, absolutely not. I, just kept saying no. But then after high school, I got married the same week I graduated from high school. Bad thing, bad choice. I stayed in that marriage for 30 years. It wasn't always abusive, but it did become abusive. Just a lot of power and control, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, and then the physical comes. And in most cases, the physical comes after that. So that's when I ran and got out. But I've been given some life commands, if you will. My parents did well. I mean, they were Christian people, but they gave me some commands that I wasn't prepared for a lot of things. And there had never been a divorce in my family. So if I could just hang on until my parents were gone, then I could get well, if you will. And but then when it got so bad, they understood and they gave me their blessing, which was huge for me.
Sure.
But I would just like Miss Wendy right now to encourage people to know what red flags are with domestic violence. Mm-hmm. Just go online and type in domestic violence red flags, and you're going to get a list of red flags to look for. And this may not be for the listener. It might be for a sister or a friend, a child, or a grandchild might even be headed in that direction. And if you don't know what the red flags look like, you don't know how you can help them. So I would just encourage everybody to do that.
Right. And someone who is in an abusive relationship learns well how to hide it, especially if they grew up in an abusive situation. Your story echoes mine somewhat in having a difficult family life. I love my mom. I love my dad. But we know that there is no such thing as a perfect parent. And my mother was abusive, and I love her. She loves me. We've just talked this morning. Things are fine. But growing up with someone who has a mental illness is not fun, much less if they have an addiction, and alcoholism affected our family. And it taught me to be quiet and to retreat. So I can understand what you're saying. And I, too, was then set up for allowing some unhealthy behavior in my marriage. And I think as a believer and as a Christian, we can go into our marriage with such a heart to please God and keep that desire, but sometimes stay and accept things that are not healthy, are not good, are not of God. And you may be listening to me right now, and I want you to know that God values you. He created you. He loves you. And He never created you to be someone's verbal punching bag or physical or mental punching bag. And it is okay to say, I don't like being treated this way. This is not okay. Mm-hmm. Sue, I know that your story is special because it's a story of overcoming. And, you know, something that people don't talk about a lot is, what would I do if I had been married for 30 years? You were probably with this man. Well, I know you were. You're with this man as an
forever.
adult. You grew up with him. You were with him longer than you were at home with your parents.
And you're put down so much that you don't have any confidence, that you don't think you can make it on your own. You don't believe that you have any worth. And so I think that's where I became invisible, is that I used to think I was shy. And what I've come up with, Miss Wendy, is I don't think I was as shy as I was just insecure. I always compared myself to others and always came up short, you know. So I just wasn't worthy. And so after being conditioned for so long, you just, and people think, well, you can just leave. No, you can't.
Right.
You can't do that. It just, you're not healthy. The day that a friend gave me the book, Codependency No More by Melanie Beatty, changed my life. I didn't even know it was a disease. I didn't know. And once I realized, hey, there's a name for this. I can put my hat on this. I can, like, okay, this is real. And codependency just means that you don't know where your life ends and theirs begins. I couldn't make a decision. And if I did, it was never going to be. You know, I just didn't have a say-so. I didn't have a voice. So I had to be invisible.
And you had to learn to adjust to his mood or to his feelings. And so if he was okay, you were okay, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And the same thing with the children, I'm sure.
Yes. It's just unhealthy. And, you know, I really stayed for the children. I believe in the marriage. My parents taught me that way. I believe in the marriage. So I was absolutely not going to ever be a divorcee, ever. And I stayed for them. And then there came a day that I learned that I was teaching them it's okay to treat your spouse this way. It's okay to be abusive, and it's okay to take it. And at that point, it's like, I can't do this anymore. And it had gone so much worse by that time. Yeah.
So let's pick up a little bit in the story where you left off. You get married. Tell me about working at the grocery store.
I learned to kind of come out of myself at the store. I learned to talk to people a little bit. Particularly, I had the older people would just stand in my line forever, long line, and I prided myself because they wanted to come through my line, and I loved it. I loved everything about it. And so I think I grew a lot. I believe that God puts us in different places to give us some skills and tools that we need for things. And that was a growing time for me.
And it helped some because people were coming to you. You were not having to go to them, right? They would come to your line.
Right.
So you didn't have to step out of that comfort zone to introduce yourself and all of these great things. But they needed you. You knew how to handle that.
Well, we need somebody to need us. And especially those of us that are people pleasers. I'm a people pleaser, and I want you to like me and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And so I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to take a commercial break, and that way I don't interrupt the bulk of your story, which we'll get to as soon as we come back.
All right.
Are you suffering from a past hurt? Lingering pains can inhibit your potential to be all that God has in store for you in your life. As a biblical counselor, Miss Wendy has written Healing Waters, a 21-day workbook which offers well-thought-out steps to emotional recovery. Making use of hands-on activities, prayers, and meditation on Scripture, Miss Wendy helps build faith and develop patterns that establish lifelong vitality. Why not take that step to the healthy, whole, God-filled individual you're meant to be? Go to mattersoftheheartradio.org to order your copy today. That's mattersoftheheartradio.org.
We want to hear from you today. Call into the show at 469-844-5152. You can also chat with us by clicking on the chat icon in your player to send us a message. Now, here's your host, Ms. Wendy.
Well, you're joining me as I talk with Sue McGray about a book she's written called Becoming Visible. If you've ever felt invisible in a crowd, you can relate to some of the things that we're talking about. When you feel invisible, it's because you have a general truth that you're believing within inside of yourself, and we believe our own thoughts more than anything else. And the thoughts usually sound something like, no one wants me here, or I'm not as good as they are, I'm not as pretty as they are, I'm not as educated or talented, or you have a number of excuses for why you don't measure up. And I want you to know that sometimes convincing yourself of these things began with you and sometimes they didn't. It may be something that someone has spoken to you. Maybe they told you, get out of here, I don't want you in here, or you're stupid, or you're dumb. I can think of when I was told not to talk. I thought at first it was because the man that I was married to had my best interest in mind. He was more educated. He knew more about the Bible than I did, until we got into an argument one day and he said, no, it's because I'm embarrassed when you open your mouth because you sound like you came from the ghetto. That was early on in a marriage relationship, and that wounded me. It made me feel very insecure about talking. And over the next 10, 15 years after that, I got quieter and quieter and quieter. And it was detrimental. But I want you to know that when God comes into our life and He begins to deposit truth within us, if we're willing to embrace it, we have a part to do. If we're willing to embrace it, we can heal and become whole. As you can tell, I'm not quiet anymore. Now I talk to hundreds and thousands and millions of people around the world on the show. And I'm so thankful for God for what He's done in helping to correct the lie that I believed. Sue, could you identify lies that maybe you were believing that caused you to feel invisible?
Well, I think so. I learned how not to know anything, for one thing. There for a while I was growing and learning, and I would want to share, and I would just had to learn how, because I was becoming a threat, because if I had a voice, I would be a threat. So I made a conscious decision to not know anything, and that's painful. That really hurts. It stifles their growth, and God doesn't want that. But that's what I did for a long period of time, and then I realized that that really wasn't helping my marriage either, that wasn't working. And I think about that at that point, God put somebody in my life that was such an ambassador for me. She was a voice that I needed to hear. I knew that my marriage was in trouble, but I was still in denial big time. And I was out of town, in her town where she lived, and for some reason, or so I didn't know what the reason was, I just dropped by to see her in her drugstore, and I was sitting on a box in the back of her stock room one day, and she said to me, out of the blue, she didn't know anything in my situation. We'd never really been that close at that point, and she said, Sue, what is it going to take? And that got my attention, and this question totally changed my life. God put Patty in my life for such a time as that, and woke her up during the middle of the night many, many, many times, and she would pray for me during that crucial time in my life. She didn't know what was going on, but, I had to hit rock bottom to learn how to trust God. I kind of had gone on my dad's faith. I kind of wanted to be the grandchild, I guess. God doesn't have grandchildren, only children. And so I had to personally learn how to trust God and to have a relationship with Jesus. and not depend on my daddy's faith. You know, he just knew all the answers, so I didn't have to, I thought, for a long time.
Sure.
And you know, I believe that God can heal marriages, but there has to be willing people to do that.
Yes.
And at one
two
point,
willing people.
Two willing people, exactly.
One's not enough.
That's right. And I kept believing that my marriage would be healed. And so he came by to pick me up, and we went to lunch. And God spoke to me at the salad bar.
Tell me. Were you at the cucumbers?
I never expected him to speak to me out loud, but it was as loud as, I mean, I heard it. And so I'm getting my salad at the salad bar, and he kept saying, or this voice kept saying at the time, it's like, what's going on? The lake, the lake, the lake. And I went and sat back down, and I said, did you go to the lake this weekend? Well, that blew up totally. He left, called the children, they were grown by then, and said, your mom's caught me. She had a PI after me. And I had this secret. I can't tell anybody that I don't know what it's all about.
Wow.
But God spoke to me, and I thought, oh, my goodness, God, you love me that much that you would talk to me and tell me something that I need to know, that I had no way of knowing that. And so that was such a strength. My faith was strengthened so much through that time. I had moved out with nothing. I had the clothes on my back and a few little clothes and a papasan chair, as I say, and lived in a one-bedroom apartment for 4 years. And that was such a sweet time, though, that God ministered to me during that time.
So let me back up a little bit. You're sitting at you're in the salad bar line, putting some cucumbers on your salad. And you hear a voice saying the lake.
The lake. The lake.
And you go back to the table and you question your husband about the lake.
I just said, did you go?
And what did he say?
He said, I knew you had a PI after me. I knew you had a private detective. I was just there to call it off. He called the kids, told them he was caught. This whole thing. And me and God is just having this really.
And are you just surprised thinking, wow, I never knew all of this was going to come out?
Yeah. And I never let him know that I didn't know anything, but it gave me enough information that I realized that nothing was going to change, and so that I had to gird myself up and get myself together.
And so you found the strength then to move.
Well, actually, I had moved. He had threatened to kill me, and I had moved before that. But I was still believing that my marriage was going to be healed.
Whoa.
Okay.
Whoa. He threatened to kill you?
Yeah. I'd been going to codependency group, and he said, if you go to that, I'm going to leave you. It was always threatening. And one morning, out of the blue, he just said, I'm going to kill you. I ought to just kill you. And I said, I learned some things, and I said, that's not acceptable. And I got up and went to the next room, and then I knew I was in trouble. And I ran, and God had told me the night before which way to go. And I went that way, and immediately there were police cars all over me. I blew the horn because I saw one policeman. He came behind me in his vehicle and was trying to get into mine. And police, they were just all over me. It's like, where did they come from? God, you set this up? You knew this was happening.
So you were trying to run from him. He's coming after you, your ex-husband, and there were police around you?
Yes. The police was all over me. I saw one at the red light, and I blew my horn, and immediately they were just all over me. And so I tried to convince them, I'll be fine. I've run before. He'll calm down. It's going to be okay. And everybody left but this one police lady, and she knelt down beside my car, and she said, she put her finger in my face, and she said, lady, let me tell you how it is. If you don't go right now and get an order of protection, it'll be too late. You've got to do it right now. I'm scared to death because I know that is the most dangerous time in a relationship is when you try to leave. It's very dangerous today I work with a domestic violence center here in Nashville, and I know that it's so dangerous to do that. But I took a friend and I actually did that, and I never went back home. And that's the weirdest feeling, not to go back home, because that's all you know. I finally drove around until I found an out-of-the-way hotel so he couldn't find my car, and checked in and went to church the next morning, and some people came to me and friended me and took me home with them and kept me for, I don't know, 2 or 3 months.
Wow.
Until I could get an apartment. Yeah.
Wow.
But I never expected to hear God's voice and to feel like, God, what's going on here? Yeah.
And was when you lived by yourself, were you scared? Because you didn't go back. You really started with what you were wearing that day.
Some police people went with me to get some clothes.
Okay.
And I rented a 1-bedroom apartment. I stayed in that 1-bedroom apartment for 4 years. It was kind of my haven. My children came. My daughter was in school, and a little side note, I called her when this had happened this day, and she has kind of she doesn't have much mercy, and she said, "Hey, Mama, next time he will kill you." And so she'd been coaching me to get, to do what I had to do, and I wouldn't do it. But anyway, they went back with me to get some clothes, and gradually they would buy me a washer and dryer and a sofa, and so I had that little 1-bedroom apartment filled up, and then 4 years later I built a house. I dusted myself off. It took me a year to quit sleeping. I slept the first year. Divorce is the most devastating thing to anybody. It's so difficult because it's a loss of a dream.
Right.
Even though you know things are not right, it's a loss of a dream. And so I dusted myself off after I slept the first year, and started to increase my income and to do what I had to do, and then I built a house. And
how did you go from working at the grocery store to building a house?
Well, the grocery store was back early on, yeah. So by this time, I had moved back to Nashville. We had moved out of Nashville and moved back, and I'd lived here. I'd gone into business for myself in the cosmetic business, and I grew a lot there. I learned how to speak a little bit and to gain some confidence. And I thank God for that experience, because without that experience of growing, I would not have been able to pay my bills. I would not have been able to make it on my own. And that's what happens with a lot of women. They can't make it on their own. They're put down, they have no confidence, and can't get a good job because they have no confidence. And so I gained confidence by that time. And so I'd not been at the store for a while. It had been several years by that time. And
you were doing quite well for yourself, were you not?
I was. Through a lot of those very difficult times, I had to pretend during the marriage. I had to pretend that I didn't work because I was very restricted on what I could do, and so. But I was still able. I paid the bills, and so I realized if I can pay the bills here, I can make it on my own. And so after the first year, I started to increase my confidence and started to grow. And a year and a half or so after I built the house, and I knew, Miss Wendy, I knew without a doubt I would never get married again. Well, don't ever say never.
Agreed.
And, one time a friend of mine said, well, if God wants me to have a man, he'll just send him to my door. And I thought, well, that is just ridiculous. Well, I want you to know that during this time was of being out by myself was at such peace. I'd never experienced such peace. It was as if there was a pillow, cushion, a soft something that I was on, and I was just being loved. And I was never alone. I never felt alone, even though I was by myself. I never felt alone. I never felt lonely during that whole time. And about a year and a half, a friend from church introduced me to this man who'd moved to Nashville, and his wife had passed away. And we've been married now 19 years.
Wow.
And godly man, a man that encourages me and loves me for who I am. You know, I say he lets me, but he encourages me to be me. Mm-hmm. And what a blessing that is. Mm-hmm. And, you know, because discouragement is such a big thing. Mm-hmm. As when we're discouraged, and that's what my calling is today, is just to encourage others.
Mm-hmm. And tell us about how you're doing that these days.
Well, because of my book and because of some opportunities, I am able to do some speaking, do some women's conferences, speak in some churches, and I'm the director for Christian Women in the Media for the Nashville Southwest region. And so we do 4 nightly meetings a year and lunches and the other times. So we meet monthly. And it's just called Christian Women in the Media Association.org if you're interested in that information. And it's for speakers and writers and publishers and TV and radio people and all those people that work in the media. And so I'm right now the director of that. Also do domestic violence work and with the charity, with the Safe Place here. So I'm quite busy, actually, and just say, okay, God, what's the next step? What am I supposed to do next?
Right.
And,
go ahead.
Well, I just believe that whatever we've been given is what somebody else needs. Mm-hmm. And that might be a smile today for somebody, or it might be a hug or a word of encouragement. You know, it might be just spending time with someone. You know, people are hurting, and especially women. And maybe it's because I'm more plugged into women's needs and ministries and things, but women have so many needs and are hurting are having so many problems. Mm-hmm. And if we can just go have a cup of coffee or give them a hug or a smile or just say, you know, I care, I can listen. And, you know, Miss Wendy, I believe that Satan's most effective tool that he uses is discouragement. And nobody is immune to being discouraged. It's so easy to be discouraged. And I believe that we as believers are supposed to be sensitive to that and to reach out and just touch someone's life in some way. You know, it doesn't have to be a big way. I don't do big things. I just want to be available to encourage and to love on people. You know, I think about all the things I don't have, all of the talents I don't have. But God has given me a way a calling, if you will, to just love people and encourage people, and to give them a hope that there is peace.
Yes. So I want to ask you a few questions. Sue, can you identify what lies you were believing when you were trapped in that marriage relationship and when you felt invisible and you had not found your voice yet?
Well, one of the lies, it's interesting that you would ask me this. One of the lies was that I was shy. And what I found is that I really wasn't that shy. I just wasn't worthy. And what I learned that if I was shy around other people, that I was just thinking about myself. And for me, it's a stretch to walk into a room when I don't know anybody and talk to somebody because I'm afraid of being judged. I'm afraid of not measuring up. But when we really think about it, everybody else is thinking about their own insecurities too. So what I learned to do to get over that is when I would just feel like, I can't go talk to them, I would think, you're just thinking about yourself. You're not thinking about that woman over there who needs somebody to touch her life, to smile at her, to reach out and say a word to her. And so by doing that, I think that's one of the main things that's changed me is learning how not to be selfish. Because if I'm shy, I'm being selfish. I'm just thinking about me, and I didn't want to do that. When I realized that's what it was, that I needed to focus on somebody else and make them the focal point rather than me. Because life is not about me. It's not about us. It's about what we can do for other people.
It helped you kind of come outside of yourself, didn't it?
It absolutely did.
Well,
did.
I'm going to touch on this a little more after the commercial break. I'm going to talk about how you can overcome that sense of feeling invisible in the midst of a crowd.
Matters of the Heart radio show is a part of the only Christian radio station in Pakistan. Miss Wendy has the opportunity to share the gospel message there, and you have the opportunity to help. For a donation of any amount, you can help her to continue to bring this ministry to the people of Pakistan. For a donation of only $6, they will receive a Bible in their own native language of Urdu. Simply go to mattersoftheheartradio.org and click on the donate button today. That's mattersoftheheartradio.org.
You've been listening to Matters of the Heart Radio Live. If you enjoyed listening to the show today, we ask that you support it with your We want to hear from you today. Call into the show at 469-844-5152. You can also chat with us by clicking on the chat icon in your player to send us a message. Now, here's your host, Ms. Wendy.
Okay, how about that for a double commercial? That's how it is when you're on live. Okay, friend, are you feeling like it's hard for you to find your sense of worth within yourself in a crowd? Do you tend to feel insecure, or do you want to shy back? Where is shyness rooted in? I agree with what Sue said. Some of it is just in being self-absorbed and too self-aware, but self-aware of shortcomings rather than strengths. We all possess strengths. They're just different. And I want to encourage you and challenge you to grow past the weakness. And this is what I propose. When you find yourself in that public situation, or even if it's at home with a spouse or children, or maybe a roommate you're living with, if you begin to have that sense, and you know what sense I'm talking about because it doesn't feel right, you're not feeling good about yourself, you're wanting to shy back, to retreat, to withdraw, I want you to, the next time this happens, ask yourself, what am I thinking? Or what was I thinking? If we don't slow down long enough to think about what we're thinking, we will never be able to change the emotion or the behavior, because our thoughts directly influence our emotions. If we're thinking no one here wants us, we're going to begin to feel sad and quiet and maybe embarrassed for who we are, but all over we're not going to feel good. Well, when we're not feeling good or confident, then it impacts our emotions and we begin to be quiet, unapproachable, we withdraw. And what's sad is that all that does is go back and reinforce a lie or a negative thought that you had to begin with. So the negative thought impacts your emotions, how you feel. How you feel impacts how you behave or what you do. And then all that does is come around and feed the lie or the negative thought that you were thinking. And do you know that God doesn't want you to live this way? He wants you to identify. He wants you to line up your mind, your body, your spirit with what He says. And He says, I choose you. I have justified you. I have called you. When my child walks in the room, if I say, Isaac, come here, I'm calling him. He's welcome. He's going to come and sit right beside me, only because he's getting too big to sit in my lap now. But he's welcome. I've called you. And God calls you wherever you're at. When I first began coming out of this in my own life, Jesus gave me such a wonderful visual, because I'm a visual person, and I'm going to share it with you, and I want to give it to you as a gift. He freely gave it to me, and I will freely want to give it to you. When I walk into a room, I walk in knowing that the King of Kings is my escort. And I don't have to have a man escort me in a room to walk with my head held high, knowing that I'm valuable, because there is a king that no one can trump who says, here she is, I'm with her. And if you're a child of God, the same is true for you. But one thing we need to do, I want you to take that to heart, but one thing that will help us to overcome this is when we jot down what that thought is that we're thinking that's negative, take that, put some elbow grease behind this, and get busy looking up scriptures, God's truth, that is counter to the lie you're believing. Take that thought and let the light of God's word shine on it, so that you're no longer stuck in your own thoughts, but instead you turn to God and say, God, what do you have to say about this? You know, it took a lot. I remember the day that God said, Wendy, my faithfulness to you and my goodness to you is not dependent upon who you're married to. Just because he was in ministry, just because he had a particular reputation, my goodness to you was not dependent upon whether or not you were with him. My goodness to you was dependent upon the covenant that I made with you, my beautiful beloved. Wow. You mean it didn't have anything to do with the man I was married to? You just accept me and love me for me? Yes. And that's not just true for Wendy. It's true for Sue, and it's true for you, whomever you are that's listening to me. God loves you for you. God will be faithful to you because of the covenant that he's made with you. Now, I'm not telling everybody to run out and get a divorce because somebody has stinky feet and you don't like it or anything like that. I'm talking about being involved in abusive relationships. We need to do something about it. I'm talking about feeling invisible and like you don't matter, and how we can take this one simple step. I can't get into a whole counseling session of a number of things to do, but if I keep it simple and tell you, be aware of what you're thinking about. Bring God's word into the picture. Go do some research on that topic. Is it that you don't feel wanted? Romans chapter 8 changed my life with that when he said, I've called you, I've justified you. Wow. You want me? You pick me? If God is for you, who can be against you? Seriously. If we take these things to heart and we don't just use them as a sweet little Bible verse to memorize, but we own it and we make it our own, our lives change. God wants you to stand tall. He's ransomed you. You're his favorite. Did you know that? And he wants you to have the confidence to walk into the room and do what you need to do, or talk to people, be comfortable in your own skin, or to walk out of a situation that you don't really belong in. Any closing thoughts from you, Sue?
Well, I would just like to share along that line of self-talk. Shad Hemstetter has written a book. It's an old book. It's a very small book, but the name of it is What to Say When You Talk to Yourself by Shad Hemstetter, and I highly recommend it. And you can pretty much figure out what it's about by just the title, but what to say when you talk to yourself, because if we talk to friends like we talk to ourselves, we wouldn't have any, right? So just having that conscious of what our self-talk and putting ourselves down and telling ourselves that we're whatever, doesn't do anybody. Us being small does not make anybody else. Should not, I used to put myself down to make somebody else feel better. Well, that doesn't work.
No.
So for me to play small doesn't make you any better. So I don't need to play small. And I've been guilty of doing that a lot. But Shed Helmstetter, What to Say When You Talk to Yourself, is an awesome little read.
Yes. So tell me what positive self-talk goes on in your mind and in your life now, Sue?
I believe that if it's not positive, it's negative. And so I think I'm pretty much brainwashed that I have a blueprint of positiveness, and I have found ways to find good in everything, I think. I mean, it's not a, pie in the sky kind of thing, but seeing the best in people, realizing that, hurting people hurt people. So if somebody says to me something that's unkind, I have to stop and think, they must be hurting. There's something going on there. It's not about me here. Something's going on. So I think just learning some people skills, things like that. And also, Miss Wendy, about being afraid. I think fear holds us back so much, and realizing that we're all scared of something sometimes. And if we learn not to be afraid of one thing, you have a radio show and you're not afraid of that. But if you went to do something else, you might be a little afraid of that in the beginning. And we're all afraid of something. And so, we have to do it anyway. Just have to do it anyway. And we learn and gain confidence by doing. And when we do it anyway, we're less scared. And we look back and say, that word wasn't something I even thought about. It was for somebody else. And God is so good to take our feebleness and turn it into something wonderful.
Yes, He is. And I love what you said. I do think it's important not to automatically assume that you did something wrong when there may be tension in the air or anything along those lines. It doesn't necessarily have to have anything to do with you. It could be that that person was having a bad day, or they just came out of something, or they have something that they've never been able to share, and they don't realize that they're wearing that situation on their face, on their countenance. So please, don't automatically assume that it's you. And if you think that it may be, by all means, don't hold back. Ask, have I done something wrong, or is everything okay?
And then there are some people who just have stinking thinking, if you will. And if those people are close to you, it's going to rub off if you're not careful. I just say that if it's not your mom or sister or somebody that, just kind of, we become like the people we spend our time with. So don't wallow in that with people who are always negative and being down on everything. And it can just really rub off on us if we're not careful. So if we're not strong enough to influence them, they're probably going to influence us to be a little negative too.
It's very true. We want to be mindful of the voice that we lend our ears to, because truly we can do enough damage within ourselves, much less adding someone else to the mix. That's only going to make things worse, not necessarily better. So you're happy, you're doing well. How old are your granddaughters?
Well, they range from 11 to 23.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
My son has 3 and my daughter has 2, and then Shannon came with Dwayne, and she doesn't have any. So we have a blended family and get together for all kinds of things, and we respect each other and who they are. And as adults, I think as parents of grown children, we have to give them that freedom to be them and still have a connection there. And so I can't control other people's thinking and what they do, but just love them. And life is good. Life is very good.
So now you're married again, you're doing well, you're loving your children, you're loving your grandchildren, serving God and helping others who are going through a hard time. I'm wondering, on a closing note, how would you encourage someone who's afraid to make a change in an abusive relationship, one? And two, how would you encourage someone who feels invisible in life, period?
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's a lot. I too, like you, Wendy, I don't ever encourage anybody to leave their husband, and I believe in marriage, but no one should be in harm's way. Right. No one should live in an abusive situation, and be aware that if it's verbal and emotionally abusive, it probably will become physical. So be aware of that. Learn things. Surround yourself. Go to counseling. Marriage counseling might not work for both of you, but you can go and get help. Learn what a healthy boundary is.
This is very true.
Because if we don't have boundaries, we don't have anything to stand on. It's just whatever goes. And so we have to know when I won't accept that anymore. And then on the other one about being visible, I don't think maybe there's more people that's as sick as I was that I just think they're not. But I think that putting good thoughts in our mind, surrounding ourselves with good, positive people, reading the scriptures, growing spiritually, depending on God to lead you and guide you. I think that, and realizing that you have self-worth. You are worthy of being who you are. And it's a lie to think it's not. This is on a little bit quick side thing, but used to, and still I'm working at that. If you gave me something, I would immediately think, who would like to have this? I wouldn't even accept. I would just think, who somebody might do better with this. And no, if you give me something, I need to accept it for me, that I'm worthy of having that. Mm-hmm. But that's growth. That's a big thing. That was a big thing for me.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. It is. And I want to encourage our listener that courage grows as you do it.
Yes,
it doesn't just all of a sudden happen upon you all the time. You may find a sudden burst of energy that, yay, I'm going to be courageous to take a step here. And then you get there and you're like, oh, wait, I changed my mind. But as you take those steps, as you do it afraid, all of a sudden you find out, well, that wasn't so scary after all, and you become more confident in your own abilities to overcome, in discerning the voice of God, and leaning on God, and that's really where it's at.
It's step by step. Mm-hmm. It's not all at once, and we gain everything by doing when we test, if we're building muscles, which I don't, but you wouldn't do that all at once. You wouldn't just go and become muscular or strong and all of that, or run a marathon next week. You have to start where you are and take the next step. Mm-hmm. And that's what life is about. It's just about taking the next step and reaching out for help, reaching out for people who've been there, people who can counsel you, professionals. I always guide people toward professionals, because well-meaning friends are well-meaning friends, but
right.
They're not always objective. And
yes.
So getting some professional help is, I think, a lot better.
Yes. So, Sue, would you mind closing us out with a word of prayer for our friend that's listening?
Yes. Dear Lord, I just pray that those people that are listening right now, that there might be a phrase, a thought, a sentence that might make a difference with someone. Lord, I pray that you'll use me, and I pray that you will use Miss Wendy to further your kingdom, that it can give people hope and encouragement, and to be able to thrive and to be the very best that they can be. Lord, I just pray a special blessing on Miss Wendy's ministry. Pray that you will guide her and direct her for her further things that she does and the growth of this program. I just thank you for the privilege of being here, and I thank you for bringing me. I've not arrived, Lord, but thank you that I'm not where I used to be. Thank you for growing me, pain and all. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Well, Sue, for those who would like to contact you or reach out to you, how can they get a hold of you?
Well, I'm on Facebook by Sue Turner McGray. Also have a website, Suez, S-U-E-Z, at SueZMcGray.com. They can also order my book there, Becoming Visible, Letting Go of the Things That Hide Your True Beauty. And can message me through Facebook or send me an email. And my email, you'd probably enough information. If you want more, you can let me know.
Okay, give us the website one more time.
Okay, it's www.suez, S-U-E-Z, the letter Z, at SueZMcGray.com.
All right. Well, it's been a joy to spend this hour with you, friend. Thank you for joining.
Thank you. Thank
me
you.
today.
My pleasure.
Yes. And for you, my dear listener, I want you to know that today's the day to walk a little taller, to shine a little brighter, and to give life more than you have before. Jesus is with you. He is for you, and He loves you right there, right where you're at. Now, until next time, you keep on pressing on.
You've been listening to Matters of the Heart
Okay,
Radio
Sue,
Live.
thank you for
If you enjoyed
joining.
listening to the show today, we ask that you support it with your gifts. The show could not be made possible without generous contributions from our community of faithful listeners, and in order to make it possible to remain on the air, we need your help. The show is made possible for you and with you, so please consider making a donation today. Please visit the show's website, mattersoftheheartradio.org, and click the donation button at the bottom of the homepage. Learn about partnership opportunities and corporate sponsorship with us to order a signed copy of Miss Wendy's book, Healing Waters. To schedule a counseling session with Ms. Wendy, go to refreshingtimescounselingcenter.com. Visit us on Facebook, and please don't forget to tune in next week with Ms. Wendy on Matters of the Heart Radio Live.